My name is John Millea. I'm a singer-songwriter from up in Oklahoma. My wife and I live near Tulsa, and Granny and Grandpa Bill are my wife's grandparents. Bill and Alice, in case you didn't know who I was talking about. So we thought we would come down to their neck of the woods and see if we could find some churches that would open their doors to us, and we're real thankful to be here. And we're going to be heading over to Shreveport this afternoon for a concert there at 6:30. So I guess I get to warm up here this morning for my real long program tonight. I'm going to be sharing with you my own songs, and so this will be a little bit different than your typical Sabbath morning gospel concert, but I hope that it will be a blessing to you. I'm going to share some stories and sing some songs for you. I'm going to start out by singing a song to you about this guitar here. It looks ordinary, perhaps, but it has extraordinary history that I'm going to tell you all about. I bought this guitar at a chain store in Rockford, Illinois. They ordered it from a factory out east in Pennsylvania. The spruce board from which they made the top came from a mill in Washington. This very piece of wood they milled from a log 16 feet thick. That log had come to them from the forests of Alaska, where a mighty tree was felled that once stood proud 300 feet tall. For 500 years that tree had grown, and it grew from a seed that fell from a cone, that grew on a tree, that grew from a seed, that fell from a tree, that grew from a seed, that fell from a tree, that grew from a seed, that fell from a tree, and on from a seed that Noah planted. He planted that seed next to the ark on the mountain where it landed. That seed rode out the great flood in Father Noah's pocket. It had fallen to his feet some time before when he was cutting timber. It broke his heart to cut it down, and when it fell, it shook him sore. That tree was older far than he, older yet than Adam. It was numbered with the first ones that had sprung from the Word of God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made by him, and without him nothing was made that was made. God said, "Let us make man in our image. Let's give this world to them." So he put the man and woman in a garden he had planted. But Eve believed the serpent's lie, and Adam turned his back on God. So God cursed the snake. He said, "I will put enmity between you, between your seed and her seed. Oh, he will crush your head. You will strike his heel. He will feel the sting of death, but he will rise." Soon the woman had a son. How she hoped in her heart that he would be the one. And so it went for age upon age, till Gabriel came to Mary and said, "That holy child that will be born of you will be called the Son of God. I guess y'all can guess what chapter in the Bible that last song was inspired by. John chapter 1, of course. I travel all over, that's true, but John chapter 1 was really the inspiration for that. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. And the really truly incredible part of that chapter is down in verse 14, where it says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. This guitar became what it is. It became a guitar in 2011, after being wood and metal and all kinds of other things before, right? But it says the Word was, and the Word was God. The Word did not become. God did not become. But then you read those incredible words that the Word did decide to step down and become something. He became one of us. So that's my first and so far only Christmas song that I've written, but I sing it all year round because I don't think anybody can tell the difference. Where am I here? This next song is about me and my dad. I wrote it a few years ago. I'm 35 now. I wrote this, I was probably 28, 27. In my late 20s there, it all of a sudden hit me that I am just like my dad. I talk like him. I move my hands like him. I eat like him. I stand up and sit down like him. I scratch my back exactly like he does when he stands up from the couch. It's uncanny. Has any of you ever had that feeling of the uncanny realization that you are just like your parents in so many ways? I never felt that way as a teenager, of course. But as I got older, it dawned on me that it was true. And this is just a law of nature, right? Things make things like themselves. And so naturally, there is much about us that we don't get to decide. Our parents make us. We get our bodies from them, our looks from them. We get personality and character traits from them. And sometimes, we're thankful for that. Other times, we're not so thankful for that. In my case, like everybody, I have some things that I'm thankful for and some things that I have not been so thankful for. My dad and mom were Seventh-day Adventists when my sister and I were born for the first few years of our lives, and then they divorced when I was a real little kid. And it was one of the most painful experiences I've gone through in these years I've lived. And my dad raised my sister and I from that point forward. And it started out, all right under the circumstances, but as the years went by, my dad slowly drifted away from God, drifted out of the church, and right back into the habits that he had left behind even years before I had been born. And so when I was a teenager, my dad was smoking again, he was drinking, he was starting to use drugs again, and it progressively got worse through my teenage years. And of course, he was hiding it all from us. So here I am with a single parent who is lying to me all the time and spending his days and nights chasing a high. It was really, really difficult. And I didn't have the Lord in my life. I was raised in church, went to Adventist school, but I didn't know Jesus myself. I mostly felt like the church folk and the kids who acted spiritual in school were pretty hypocritical. That was my attitude, at least. So you can imagine, without any spiritual anchor, what did I do? Naturally, I just did what my dad did. And so for a short time, thank God it was only a couple of years, but I partied, I used drugs and drank and smoked, and it left me in a very dark place. And I was just filled with pain and emptiness and headed in a direction that I thank God, realized I just desperately didn't want to go. The funny thing about this whole story is that my dad's example had led me into this situation. And when I became ready to get out of it, and when I started crying out to God, my dad ended up playing a part in bringing me to the Lord, bringing me back to the right path. And he was still drinking, still smoking. But September 11, 2001, I was living at my dad's condo. I had dropped out of high school. I didn't have a job. And my dad and I just watched the TV all day long. Of course, anybody who wasn't at work, and probably even some folks who were, that's what they did all day that day, was watch the news. And my dad, in spite of the fact that he was still in the midst of these addictions, all he could talk about all day was Jesus is coming back. Jesus is coming back. Now that this terrible disaster has happened, everything's just going to go so fast. And he gave me a book. He went to his books, and here's my dad drinking, smoking, using meth, and here he has a leather-bound Conflict of the Ages series somewhere in his books, and he pulls out a copy of The Great Controversy for me, leather-bound, and he gave it to me, and I read it. I devoured that book, and it showed me that there was something worth living for and something worth dying for. The love of God, the gift that he's given to us, is something that people have stood for and died for ages upon ages. And God is looking for people right now to stand for him and to spread the gospel before he returns. Anyway, all kind of a long story to introduce this song, but this is my chance to kind of tell you a little bit of my testimony, at least my early testimony. When I became a Christian, God spared me from something that I think a lot of people deal with. When you grow up and you have people in your life who are supposed to be your support and your help, and they fail you, that's really hurtful. And a lot of people grow up resenting their parents, I think, and blaming other people for the way things have turned out for them. But God showed me that I had another path. I didn't have to be resentful. I didn't have to live blaming other people. I could take responsibility for my life, and I could just make the best of what I had been given. And so that all of that plays into this song. I wrote it for my dad, and you'll hear here in a minute why I say this, but he graciously allows me to sing this all over the country. You'll understand what I'm saying in a minute. And before I sing, I want to tell you that my dad has found his way back to reality. And he's been sober, I don't know, it's been 10 or 15 years. And he's back in church and working for the Lord in his own way. So we're thankful for that. Anyway, this song's called My Father's Son. I am selfish and conceited. My ego weighs a ton. I am vain and overbearing. I am my Father's son. I am my Father's son. I'm impatient and impulsive. I can't control my tongue. I am often very thoughtless. I am my Father's son. I am my Father's son. I am given to excesses. I do things overdone. I am easily addicted. I am my Father's son. I am my Father's son. But I don't blame him for what I am. I take responsibility, 'cause I'm a man. I just can't help but see it's true, how your father's sins are passed on down to you. But he gave me a love for music. He wrote a song or two. He is a man of inspiration. Dad, I owe these songs to you. I guess I owe these songs to you. And in my darkest hour, though he was in the darkness too, he pointed me to Jesus. Dad, I owe my life to you. I owe my life to you. I am confident and loyal. I don't turn and run. I am able to love deeply. I am my Father's son. I am my Father's son. There's a folk tale that some of you have probably heard, or maybe heard a version of it, told about Robert Johnson, who was a blues guitarist back in the 30s. When he started out, of course, he didn't know how to play very well, and it was taking him a while to learn. And he would go out to the clubs and try to play and sing, but the people would boo him off the stage. They just didn't want to have anything to do with him. And the story is, the legend that people tell about him is that a friend of his finally told him that he should go out to the crossroads and make a deal with the devil, and he would get what he wanted. And so as the story goes, Johnson took his guitar, headed out of town on one of the roads, and when he found a place where another road came across, well, he just waited there. And when midnight finally came around, a big fella walked up, and without saying a word, he took Johnson's guitar and tuned it like I just did, and then he played a few songs on it before giving it back to Johnson. And what people say is that this big fellow was the devil, and that when he gave that guitar back to Johnson, he was giving him supernatural power, ability to play guitar like no one else. But in exchange, of course, Robert Johnson was giving up his soul. Now, I don't know if that's a true story. I tend to believe that it's not. When I read the Bible, you don't have any stories like that in the Bible of people meeting Satan and making deals with him. You know, it just doesn't happen that way. And I think it's an interesting story that serves as an illustration of a danger that is much more mundane and much more in our faces every day. And that is simply this story and stories like it show that people are willing to give up eternity, to give up goodness and truth, things that are of inestimable value, for temporary passing pleasures, right? People do it all the time. In a metaphorical sense, they sell their soul for a drink or a dance, or it doesn't even have to be un-Adventist things even. We're in this danger all the time of putting our temporary desires above our eternal interests. You see where I'm going with that? In a way, every one of us, we can all say, I sold my soul to the devil, in that metaphorical sense. And, I woke up this morning and I was just, I don't know if any of you ever just really feel like a sinner. I woke up this morning and I was feeling discouraged. And I thought, Lord, what am I going to do? And I had my Bible. I opened my Bible, and the Lord spoke to my heart, and he said, it's a lot better to be a discouraged sinner crying out for mercy than it is to be a self-righteous Pharisee, praying, thanking God for all the good things that he has in his life. And the Lord comforted my heart when he reminded me of Romans chapter 5. In due time, when we were still without strength, Christ died for the ungodly. I can say that I sold my soul to the devil. Again, in that metaphorical sense, I don't want anyone to leave here with the idea that, I had some kind of occult ceremony and met with Satan. Nothing like that. But in the same way that we all have. But thank God, Jesus bought it back. So this song is called "I Sold My Soul," and it's my own testimony, my own story, and I think it's yours too. And I just want to encourage you: hold on until the end. It's got a happy ending. The story isn't happy at first, though, right? But it does have a happy ending. Obviously, I've not sold my soul for guitar playing powers like Robert Johnson did. My hands are a little bit chilly, maybe. I sold my soul to the devil. Yeah, I sold it pretty cheap. For things that rust and turn to dust, and things you just can't keep. I traded heaven for trash. I sold my soul to the devil. He paid cash. I sold my soul to the devil. I sold it for a high. I woke and found I'd hit the ground. I learned I couldn't fly. No, the feeling didn't last. I sold my soul to the devil, and I heard him laugh. When I sold my soul to the devil, I didn't have to meet him at the crossroads. I didn't need to sign a dotted line to know the deal was closed. I just made some choices bad. I sinned my soul to the devil, easy as that. I owed my soul to the devil, but Jesus bought it back with blood. The only price that would suffice to pay for what I'd done. He must love this foolish man as only Jesus can. 'Cause I sold my soul to the devil, but Jesus bought it back. This next song is based on Hebrews 11:21. And in a way you could say it's about another fellow who sold his soul. He sold his soul to steal to obtain a blessing from God, believe it or not. He thought he could lie. He thought he could trick and steal in order to receive God's blessing. And the verse that this song was inspired by, Hebrews 11:21, it says, "By faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and worshipped leaning on the top of his staff." Excuse me. What do we call Hebrews 11? We call it the Hall of Faith, right? Now, I don't know, how do you get into the Hall of Faith by just worshiping God with a cane? That doesn't sound like a huge accomplishment, does it? It might not at first. I always feel like it's kind of a funny verse, a little bit out of place with Abraham and Noah and Moses and all of the amazing things that they did. But Jacob, he started life out as a self-sufficient man. He has what I tell people, Jacob had the American spirit before there ever was an America. He was self-made. He knew what he wanted, and he knew how to go out and get it. He was smart. He could work hard. The problem is that he took this same attitude into his spiritual life. And I think, that's still a danger today. We can just do our hard work and obtain those spiritual things. And it took Jacob a long time to learn what it meant to trust in God, to learn the lesson of faith. And he finally did learn it. He learned it the night that he wrestled with the Lord. He, of course, was praying for the safety of his family. He was heading back to face his brother, to own up to what he had done. He didn't know what was going to happen. But he knelt there and prayed, and someone came, and they wrestled. And do you remember what it was that tipped Jacob off, that he was not wrestling with a mere man? What it was that revealed to him that it was the Lord? He reached out and touched him, and he was crippled instantly. And at that point, Jacob realized that he couldn't fight his way through life anymore. All he could do was hold on. And he held on to the Lord and said, I can't let you go until you bless me. And the Bible says as the sun rose up, Jacob walked back to camp. He went limping as he walked. He was crippled for the rest of his life. A really incredible story. And now you think of Hebrews and you realize that this cane that he leaned on was a symbol of the victory of faith over human works. The victory of faith over great adversity. This injury, I think, became to Jacob a reminder for the rest of his life. He was 97 years old when that happened, crippled by the Lord. And for the rest of his life, he had this injury. 50 more years he lived. And I think every time a storm rolled in, to build on what I was saying earlier, every time a storm rolled in and that hip started aching, what do you think he would think about? He would think about that night when he met the Lord and prevailed through faith. As the sister said earlier, God can turn pain into a blessing if we let him. And I think we're far too quick, in the church at least, to blame the devil when difficult or painful things happen in our lives. We lose a job and we say the devil's working on me, or we get sick and we say the devil's working on me. And he might be, I won't doubt that. But I think it would do us well if we would instead ask ourselves what God can do with this difficulty. And it's hard in the moment. I've been there, but if we drill that into ourselves, it might become easier to keep our eyes on God instead of turning to the enemy. Anyway, this song is called Leaning on a Cane. I'm going to sing the chorus to Leaning on the Everlasting Arms at the end of the song. And if you all would like to, I'd be happy if you joined in with me. When I was a baby in my mother's womb, I wrestled my brother for first place. He came out ahead, but I had him by the heel. And that is how I got my name. They called me Jacob, 'cause that's what I am. I'm a crafty, self-sufficient man. I never leaned on anybody, oh, I lived up to my name. But now I worship leaning on a cane. God had told my mother that the blessing would be mine, so I thought I'd help him make it happen. I cheated my brother and I lied in my father's face. Believe me, he wasn't laughing. They called me Jacob, 'cause that's what I am. I'm a crafty, self-sufficient man. I never leaned on anybody, oh, I did things my own way. But now I worship leaning on a cane. My sin cost me dearly, I had to run away, 'cause my brother was out to do me in. By and by came the time to head back home, time to own up to my sin. And on the way as I prayed in the darkness, I met a man. I wrestled him for my life until he reached out his hand. He crippled me up with just a touch as the day began to dawn. And all at once it hit me, I'd been fighting God. Called me Jacob, 'cause that's what I was. But I don't fight him anymore. No, I've learned to trust. I never leaned on anybody, but now I've got a brand new name. And now I worship leaning on a cane. Yeah, now I worship leaning on my cane. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. Amen. I go around the country singing these songs. I've been doing it for several years now. And I've been sharing that message of how God can use pain. And so I go around telling people that they ought to think differently when trouble comes into their life. And it's easy to do, standing up here telling somebody that when they lose their job, they should ask the Lord what he wants to do with this difficulty. Or when they get sick, or, it's easy to tell people how to do things. But of course, it's another thing to go through it yourself. And so a couple of years ago, I was doing a concert sharing that story about Jacob, and I have a song about Job. I'm not going to share it with you this morning. It's part of my longer set list. But anyway, and I just got to thinking, I'm sharing this message, and I feel like my life is relatively pain-free, relatively trouble-free. And there are so many people out in the world who are suffering incredible things, illnesses, all kinds of difficulties. And I just thought to myself, I wonder what's going to happen in my life, and when. So it's been about a year and a half now. The Lord gave my wife and I an opportunity to practice this lesson when our little girl Maggie was born. The pregnancy, labor, and delivery, all of that was really great. We were expecting a healthy baby girl, but when Maggie was born, it was immediately apparent that something was wrong. She had large patches of her skin that looked like they were like third-degree burns. They looked like scars. It looked like some of the layers of skin were missing. And she was not in pain. But she had it just looked really, really bad. And we could tell that there was some asymmetry in some of her features, in her face and her hands and feet. It was probably the most painful experience of my life so far. It's like being punched in the gut when you're expecting a healthy child, and then you find out suddenly that something's wrong. And you have no idea what. So Maggie was born at 8:01 a.m. on September 19, 2016, and while Elisa recuperated at the birth center in Tulsa, we have a really wonderful midwife that our family has used, and we love her to death. While Elisa was recuperating, the midwife and I took Maggie to the ER just a few blocks down the road at St. Francis Children's Hospital, and she was admitted at 8:33. Of course, the ER doctor had no idea. Then the NICU doctors come down, and they have no idea. And people are afraid to touch her. They don't know if her skin is falling off, and we assured them, no, her skin's not falling off. But it was just quite an experience. And as a first-time parent, it was especially difficult because, I don't know. Anyway, it was hard, as you can imagine. We turned our hearts to the Lord, and we prayed a lot and cried a lot those first few days. And it became clear that, she was doing fine. She was heart, lungs, all of that was fine. She wasn't in pain. She wasn't sick. And we found out within that first week that she has a rare genetic disorder. They looked at all of her symptoms and thought, this is probably what it is. And so we were there in the hospital for 24 days. Over the course of that time, we found out that Maggie doesn't see out of her left eye. Her left eye has several problems, developmental problems. Her left ear is the same way. It didn't grow correctly, so she's partially hearing impaired on the left side. But she sees fine and hears totally fine on the other half. Her skin issues have not presented any terrible complications. She'll have issues her whole life that she'll have to deal with: fingernails, hair, teeth. But she's doing really well, and thankfully she's taking a nap right now. Usually she's pretty talkative when I'm up here. So anyway, my point in all of that is that we had an opportunity to try to deal with this suffering in a productive way. And instead of being angry or upset or thinking all about the devil and all that he was trying to ruin our lives or whatever, we just were asking ourselves, God, what are you going to do with this? What purpose does this play in our lives? What purpose does this play in your kingdom? And we have seen Maggie with her joy and her exuberance bless people all over where we travel. How many of you have heard of a lady named Brett Butler? She was Grace in Grace Under Fire, which was a real popular TV show. Is that familiar to anybody? No? A couple people. Anyway, this Hollywood lady found my music on the internet through my daughter. She found my daughter on the internet because she knew another girl with her syndrome, and then she found my music, and she got on YouTube and started commenting. She considers herself a Christian, but she says that she's a surly soul. So she maybe doesn't feel like a real church person, but she loves the Lord, she says, and she's been really appreciating these songs. Anyway, the point is, that God has already done some things to bring Jesus into people's lives through our little girl. And so I wrote this song for her. One of the things that I thought about after she was born is that you can't love in this world without hurting. It's just part and parcel. In a sinful, broken world like this, you just can't love without hurting. At some point, you're gonna hurt when the person you love hurts. You're gonna hurt when they leave you. You never know what's going to happen, but love comes with pain, and that pain, speaking of pain and how God uses it in our lives, the pain that comes to you from loving other people is probably the best, the holiest, and the most healing kind of pain that you could experience in this life. And for that reason, there are people, a lot of people out there that don't make the effort to love people because they know it's hard. They know it's going to hurt. But we can't be the ones who draw back. We have to be the ones like Jesus who lay our hearts on the line and love people, no matter what the cost might be. So that's what this song is about.
From the moment I laid eyes on you, I knew you were mine. Oh, the first time that I saw your face, I was overjoyed and I was terrified. I'd been dreaming of that day that everything would go our way, but life ain't always kind. You fill my heart, you fill my heart to breaking. You fill my heart, you fill my heart, you fill my heart to breaking. Oh, you made me feel so helpless and you made me feel alive. In you I found a purpose, child, that I think I'll carry with me till I die. And when everybody else steps back and leaves you by yourself, I'll be right by your side. You fill my heart, you fill my You fill my heart, but don't despair, my lovely one, when I say my heart is breaking. For broken people in a broken world, love means aching. But we're in His hands and He's reshaping. You fill my heart. You fill my heart to breaking. You fill my heart. You fill my heart. You fill my heart to breaking.
This is kind of a new thing for me. I just started playing piano about a month ago now. This is my fifth. It's my fifth time performing this song in front of an audience on the piano. So it just goes to show that you can do anything if you set your mind to it. Now, I have to admit, this is the only song I can play on the piano. But I've been enjoying playing it. This is a new song, as I mentioned, and I kind of use gardening as a metaphor for God's purpose in creating this world. When He planted the first family on this earth, He intended other families to grow out from that family. And of course, you can't fill something with love unless you fill it with loving people. And that was God's plan in filling this earth with families, was to fill it with love. But of course, it didn't happen according to His ideal, but He certainly had a plan to replant the seed that we sullied as human beings. So anyway, this kind of just tells the creation and redemption story with that gardening metaphor.
Planted a garden, you tilled up a man, you took him apart and you gave him her hand. That's how you started to fill out your plan. You planted a family to live on the land. You planted love, love, love. You planted love, 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 love. You planted some freedom. She picked the wrong fruit. A smooth-talking demon had her confused. So they planted treason, and how it took root right on this earth where you planted the truth. You planted love, love, love. You planted love, 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 love. You stooped down to the earth, got right into the dust, and you broadcast justice and mercy unheard of, and watered it with your own sweat, tears, and blood. And how the earth trembled when it sprang up, the lonely seed that fell and died rose again, and it was glorified, bringing forth an unnumbered host, shining like the sun. You planted love, love, love. You planted love, love, love. You planted love, love, love. You planted love, 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 love. You planted love. Thank you all for having us.